Glasgow in the house, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, from Glasgow as well, it's the whole Glasgow table. Well, I don't, we want to integrate Scotland here, okay.
I mean, sure, Ross Tyler, said Angels, it's just about. I'm Jack, I'm also from Glasgow. Lately I work for Unite the Union, which they have took a move in the last year or so. They want to try to do community organising, and I've tried to set up structures and get people involved in doing that, and that's what I actually work at now. So yeah, I heard about it because of people I've worked with, some of the people who organise this in Edinburgh, but I honestly thought it would be particularly useful for me.
Well, I wish we had a couple extra hours, we could talk about community union projects around the world, which is something I know a lot about. Maybe we'll get a minute. Which way are you going? This way?
Hi, I'm Alison. I'm a member of Edinburgh Scotland Action Group. I don't know what it is.
My name's Liz. I'm in Edinburgh as well. I'm also a member of Edinburgh Scotland Action Group. I came here today for similar reasons, but I'm just part of looking at ACORN in Edinburgh in particular.
I am Nani. I've been involved with that our tennis group, and then also done stuff on like open cast coal mining and resistance in South Africa.
I'm Lucy. I'm a member as well. I'm mainly working with communities and asylum seekers and some prison solidarity stuff.
I'm involved in community projects
I'm Kate. I'm Christine. I'm involved with the Palestinian Welfare North Island, and I'm from the social regeneration and currently the sort of the collective building towns.
Olga studies social anthropology for 2 more years, and I'm also a student activist for 10 years to see
Welcome.
what we're doing.
I'm Nick. I'm also a member of Kitchen Porter.
My name is Will. I work as a youth worker, working with also the Adult Learning Project Association and our education group, and with Bridgend Inspiring Growth, which is a campaign for the community renovation and ownership of a farmhouse building.
I'm Orla, and I'm studying community education, and I'm interested in looking at the differences and similarities between community education or community development in the UK and community organising.
Big difference. We could stay a long time too. I could be here for weeks, but luckily this does end at 5.
I'm on the clock. Hi, I'm Paul. I used to work in politics, but began to read a lot about what the work that ACORN was doing around the world, and became really interested and inspired by it. So, kind of been getting together with a group of us here in Edinburgh to try and get ACORN off the ground in Scotland. So, that's why I'm here today.
I'm Jenny. I'm an activist in various ways, and I'm very impressed with that tonight. They've got a great future. They've had some really good successes, and I run a website that's devoted to community activity and achievement, and we have a really good following.
Excellent. Okay. I was interviewed today. That was just me. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Alison from Glasgow as well. I'm a nurse. I'm in the Actors Federation. And the main person behind my local residence group, which is like third or fourth incarnation over the last 9 years I've been living in the social housing where I do. So Queen's Cross Housing Association Residents for Change, which is the name of the
For reform now, for change. I'm all about that. Let's go.
And also the Solidarity Network in Glasgow, which is based on the Seattle Solidarity Network.
That's self-interesting.
I'm here. I'm involved in Edinburgh Private Tenants Action, and I'm also involved in our attempt to set up ACORN here in Edinburgh.
I'm Yanis, I live in Edinburgh, and I'm also involved in this attempt.
Well, I hope that wasn't too boring for you all. It was fascinating for me. So now at least I have a better idea of the wide range of places people are coming from, including Glasgow, United, anarchism, students. Wow, we got it all here. So we're going to talk about campaigns. I'm going to ask John and Keir to lay out the campaign we're going to talk about. So it'll probably be something you're familiar with. Let me go through some of the elements first that I want us to keep in mind as we talk about campaigns. We're going to generally talk about strategy. It's a strategy of how to win, what tactics fit into that strategy. Normally, tactics are about putting pressure on power, simply put. The more effective the pressure, the more likely you have some results in the change. So, but determining strategy and tactics, whatever the campaign is, what are the elements that you need to know as you approach any campaign? You need to know anything. Targets are important. What you want to do, so I make decisions. You want to have some background, some research involved. You need to, talk to Mr. Google. You need to figure out some research, either very sophisticated or simple enough to know that you have a shot.
And need to know your members, maybe, your potential members.
You need to have some clarity of constituency, who you're fighting with and who you're fighting for. Back to your point, you expressed it as, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Clarity of objectives. There's a lot of ways to say that. We've already got picking targets, different strategies. To the degree you have diverse interests in this room, part of what's become increasingly clear in doing campaign work is there be some, what I would call rules of engagement, some things that we all agree about before we all come together to be involved in this campaign. Does that sound right or wrong? A good example of a rule of engagement would be what becomes the level if we win negotiations that we would be willing to settle on. If there's not clarity going into the campaign about the rules of engagement, perhaps I'd be willing to settle for organizing rights for the workers involved, and over here they're only interested in what the level of the price is for the housing. So winning organizing rights for the construction of all new social housing might be an objective for, say, labor, but reasonable, affordable rents might be an objective for the tenants. How do you reconcile those things? How does everybody get what they want? Or can you have a situation in which everybody is in the campaign, but people try to cut separate deals? This is a problem, I don't know about here, but in the United States, it's a huge problem in major campaigns, that you get to a point where you're all together, and then as the campaign becomes closer to victory, everybody moves their own direction. So if you're not careful in the front end, you can really have a problem. Anything else about campaigns that you're clear about before we jump in? I mean, more will come up as we talk about specific campaigns. But
if you want a campaign, you have to reach out not just to do research and the constituency, you've got to put the information out there. And you've got to make sure that information is easy to grab and understood. Because although we're in the 21st century, you still have people with literacy and numeracy issues. And you have to feel that everything is so complicated as beyond there. So you have to put it very easy and small chunk. much of it. And she came to my door, I mean, she just felt overwhelmed and stressed out. And I realised that I think it was very inconsiderate for me.
Well, an interesting observation. Certainly, pulling out what you said, communication, outreach, both of those I think we would all believe is important. How do you communicate with that constituency? How do you engage and involve them? It's all good. Other things? Remember, this is not an exhaustive list. Other things will come up. We're just some things to focus on. Focus is important. As we get into the campaign, we might get lost in the details of what a bedroom tax is, or what public policy can be, or what level of government, or whatever. And I don't want us to lose the universal principles that we want to keep in touch with and how we look at all campaigns, whether it's campaigns you're involved in, the campaigns that we talk about as an example. Want to go forward? Okay, so here, John, how are you all doing this?
Sure, so I'll go over it, yeah. So we decided a good issue for us to pick would be something that everyone would be familiar with. So we decided to go for the bedroom tax, and in a way, we talk about this a little bit. It's obviously quite confusing. The nitty-gritty is quite confusing, but broadly. So for those who maybe don't know all that well, the Conservative government brought in this policy whereby your housing benefit, if you're in social housing and you're receiving housing benefits, the amount of benefit you will receive will be reduced if you have spare rooms. And that'll be, despite the fact that even if you've got care and responsibilities or whatever, they don't really take that into consideration. So you lose 14% if you've got one spare room, 25% if you've got two spare rooms. So that's housing association tenants and council tenants. So that's basically broadly what the issue is. Unless there's any questions or any queries over that, maybe there's that detailed thing to move forward with that. Or
Y'all tell me, does everybody understand the issue? So,
just a quick add-on, like this already is with private tenants. That the original thing supported by the Labour government, and that so it already affects like private tenants and private housing.
yeah, it's a bit different though. So yeah, perhaps we can focus on the
No, it's just
yeah.
so there already is a bedroom tax on private tenants? And how long has that been the case?
It's not exactly. The level of private housing benefit has already been cut so much that it's equivalent, like the money you get towards your rent is kind of equivalent, like you would be able to get enough money in benefit to sustain a private house that would have lots of bedrooms on it, you would get charged for it.
Fascinating, but I guess we're not going to talk about that.
No, I think we just focus on the bedroom tax, as people are discussing in the media and things like that, just for housing association and council tenants. I think that'll keep it simple for us when we're discussing the issue.
So who promulgated this new tax?
It's the Conservative government brought this in
all over the country.
Westminster covers, Scotland, England, Wales, the whole lot, so there's lots of levels. The council has some discretion over it. The Scottish government may question the Scottish government, and there's the Westminster government, obviously, if we want to get the policy reversed or something like that. So there's lots of levels, and there's something you do probably in your community with your landlord. So if you're a housing association tenant, you might be able to, get some leeway from your landlord. They might be able to redesignate the rooms as something that isn't a bedroom, for example. So there's various tactics that, depending on the constituency, we might be able to use to tackle the campaign. So
that's getting into the conversation. So
yeah.
Okay. So I may or may not understand it, but luckily all of you do. So let's talk about, if we have a rough idea of the bedroom tax, 14% reduction in benefits for one spare room, 25% reduction in benefits for two spare rooms. What defines a spare room?
It's very ambiguous.
Basically,
Well, I got lucky on the first one, didn't I?
a spare room has to be inhabited by, a bedroom in a social house has to be inhabited by an adult or a couple or two children. So kids have to share a room. If it's a couple, they both have to sleep in the same room, or it needs to be an individual. If it doesn't fall under that, there are some exemptions, like military personnel who are away serving, for the exemption. So there's some limits, but generally that's the way it works. It's not a room to be slept let in by somebody, then they'll not pay for it and benefit.
Okay, so spare room is by definition not inhabited,
Yeah.
except in,
But as I say, like, if it was one kid, they would count that uninhabited. If you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a kid who has divorced parents. They would only have residency at one house. They would not be allowed to have a bedroom kept for them at the other parent's house.
As part of custody, they won't be able to pay around for the room they need as part of the custody arrangement to see their kids.
gotcha. So, are the exemptions worth us spending a lot of time on? Is there a way to expand the exemptions?
I think there's an ambiguity as well, like, I mean, I'm sort of asking this to people that know more about it, like, because it's very much focused on bedrooms. I don't know if there's an ambiguity around people, like, if your room is a dining room, or if your room is a lounge, or if it's storage cupboard, by definition. I don't know if anyone if that's an ambiguity, a point of ambiguity that could be explosive.
My spare bedroom is not a bedroom as such, but it's my library and the reception room. It stops me from having a stranger into the house and the dining room and the kitchen. So they go into a side room, which is a full bedroom basically. And it's also where I study, write, work. I practice yoga and exercise in that room because I have a health problem. So I know that I've got to exercise as part of my treatment. So that front bedroom is not a bedroom where you sleep in, there's no bed, it's lined with books. It's where I work, and where I live in complete strangers, where I practice yoga and meditation every day, do weightlifting and stuff like that.
So you think you could get an exemption to that room, or you couldn't?
I tried when the council phoned me and asked me what I wanted to do about my house. I said, well, I'm not going to do it, but my bedroom is not the bedroom, so I don't see why I should pay this tax. And it was ignored. He said, well, that's not my problem, that's not my issue, I don't want to know, I don't care about that. So I got to pay it. But I got in touch with the Coram Centre in Glasgow and actually asked them for clarification because I have a lady down in Newry Marshall who has 2 bedrooms. Now Linda, I just had liver surgery, she's had a liver transplant, she's got a terrible heart problem. And her mother has had to move into a flat, into a house because the old lady has just had an embolism and is not allowed medically to manage their cases. So she's occupying Linda's bedroom. Linda's son is still living with her because Linda is to sit and look at herself and look at her mum. So he still occupies his own bedroom, which he had ever since he was born. And Linda is currently sleeping in the sofa in her sitting room. And she's been emanated from the council basically to get that sorted out because she has no spare room and she's paying the bedroom tax. Canny Mackenzie, the Reverend from Kirk, who is the top guy chair for the South Group, has a lady, Aisha, who went to see him on the 30th of March of this year, saying that she has 6 children, she's married, and she has 4 bedrooms for these 6 children, and she has to pay the bedroom tax because she's under-occupying. And basically what it worked out is that because the children are all under 10, all the children under 10 could share the one room, and then the one over 10 could if it's 2 boys, for example, they could share. After 16, they have to have separate bedroom. So they reckon that because the lady is over 16, everybody can share. So she's definitely, according to them, having to pay because she's under-occupying. I mean, it raises crazy situation.
Gotcha. Okay.
The use of room is often defined by tenancy agreements, and there have been a lot of housing associations and councils who have changed the usage of the rooms. There's no
So that hasn't happened across the board. It's been individual housing associations, some done, some haven't. So there's scope, I think, to put pressure on each one to follow the example of going further. There's exemptions for things like if a room has become empty because someone has died, you've got like a 12-month exemption from bereavement. But a lot of people don't know that, and as you can imagine, a lot of houses are just putting the tax in place anyway. So there's a role for us as organisers to make people aware of the exemptions that they give out to us.
Right. What we look for in campaigns as well are what we call, in the U.S. at least, vernacularly, is handles. Ways that we can grab onto an issue that will resonate with other people. When you're talking about a campaign that benefits, we refer to these as minimum standard campaigns. So what we try to do is exactly the kinds of things y'all are pointing out. Find, through the process of these kinds of discussions, examples, writing down, all the exceptions that are made by different, this is a national program. So in a national program, there by definition isn't local discretion. Any discretion locally in Glasgow or Edinburgh, this place or that place, affects what the national standards should be. So by creating minimum standards that say, essentially create a formula that we drive to clarify this ambiguity that you're pointing out, you try to then win a common set of standards into every enforcement authority of what would be the basic things for an exemption. Follow me? So although getting into the weeds here is very complicated, it's very detailed, let me tell you a story briefly of another campaign. So when we used to organize welfare recipients on a minimum standards campaign, there'd be a flat grant. That's what your benefit level is. And there'd be various things as part of that benefit. But let's say you found out that the welfare system, somebody had a fire, so they replaced all their furniture. Let's say you found out that somebody coming on to welfare didn't have enough chairs in the kitchen for every child they had in the family, and the welfare, in addition to the benefit payments, gave them a voucher to buy extra chairs. Or they didn't have 4 sheets per bed or a blanket or whatever. And we would literally talk to hundreds, thousands of welfare recipients and find out all these exceptions that are just discretionarily been given to people. And what we would then do with those things is we'd make a form. And we'd literally, and we wouldn't do this in people's houses. In people's houses, when we were door knocking, we'd show the form. During this benefit campaign, a lot of people are talking about the bedroom tax. What we understand, it doesn't seem right, is people are getting, some exemptions, it's not clear. But we found out that, for example, did you know if you have blank, 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 you can get, approved for that extra bedroom without paying. Or if you found out you have blank, 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 you get so-and-so. So we create a form in which you couldn't fill it out of the house, but I'd show it to you. You'd have sample in big letters. You have to come to the meeting to fill out the form. Remember, I'm still building an organization. I'm not a campaigner. Campaigns and issues are to help me build a mass organization that's powerful enough to deal with all issues. Come to the meeting, you fill out the form. So you don't, this doesn't apply to you, but here, I'm in that situation. Or, somebody just died in my house. What do you mean somebody just died in my house? Is that, yeah, it turns out you get a 1-year exemption on the tax. So check that out. Here you got your name, your address, and whatever to follow through for the group action. You go down to demand reconciliation. I don't know, who enforces this? What agency? Where do you go to? If you've got, when you have your issue, where do you go to get it resolved? There's a local office, welfare office, benefit office. Is it geographical or?
Yeah. Most places it would be probably, most places the social housing is council, or predominantly still owned by the council. Where we're from in Glasgow is that it's been all transferred into housing associations, and the council doesn't have any stock anymore. So they have local housing associations that will probably have headquarters within the community. You can go and as well.
Okay, so So in the United States, they have systematically, since the 1960s, eliminated all local welfare centers and all local benefit centers and made them citywide in order to stop there from being direct actions to deal with these kind of issues. Because what we've done since the 60s is, once you get everybody and their exceptions, you're trying to clarify. What you're trying to win is an agreement with the government that your form becomes the form. That you may not win 100 out of 100 issues, but whether or not you can win a definition of what become the minimum standards for that program. And we would do it based on doing an action at that local benefit office. So if you at your meeting had 50 people fill out the forms, you'd get all 50 of those people who are going to come bring their forms and turn it in. Clearly, if they turned in the form without the organization, what's going to happen to that form? I mean, whatever, throw it in the bin, or whatever you call it.
When I confronted the Edinburgh District Council on implemental with issues with the bail tax and the exemptions, there is a form called discretionary housing payment form. And the Durham Law Centre produced a very nice one entitled the Toolkit. And I was horrified one afternoon when I organised a public meeting to distribute these forms around the area, that the staff of the council were very angry for me asking them. I was taking just 8 forms, basic form from them, and I went to a local organisation and said to the boss, can you make photocopies of this? And I stipulated to the council that this were my intention. I was going to go around the tables and make sure that people who fill this form would fill this form. And I thought, I'm in really bad hell.
But you're not surprised given this conversation.
I wasn't surprised at all, but I was disgusted by the attitude.
Well, anger is a primary motivation for all organizing, so you're set. But
when you were saying before, like, is it worth talking about the exemptions? Because,
sounds like it is.
Well, one of the tactics that's happening, that is already happening with this, is people putting in, trying to get en masse people to appeal the decision to the local authority.
And what's happening with that?
Well, most of the time, the majority of them will be knocked back. But I mean, the idea behind it, I think, from the law centres and different people that would want to support those folk is they try and get everyone to appeal on one, because there's some suggestion that there's some laws could be in conflict with the bedroom tax, because, for example, a very high proportion of people that are affected are people with disabilities, and it could conflict with human rights, anti-discrimination law. So the idea, I think, is that they're going to have lots and lots of people appealing. The reason the council don't like it is because that's also a protest tax. It uses up their time, costs them £1,500 per appeal to deal with it all. But also, then you could then try and from that identify cases that you could make like test cases to take to court and try and challenge it legally as well.
And do they have, what level of discretion does the council have to agree with you, as opposed to just say no? Is there any chance that you could push them to agree?
Well, see, the deal with it, like, what you were saying about minimum stand campaign, right? I mean, everything that the government is doing with welfare reform is trying to remove minimum standards, because you have UK level provision of benefits, and they abolish these benefits, and they say, right, it's up to the local authority. If they want to, they can find out their own budget to bring back those benefits, instead of being provided by the national government. So I guess for a local authority, if somebody came to them and said, I have a disability, I need this room for X, Y, or Z, it would then, they're not going to be getting that money from central government, so they would then have to make a decision about their own resources, and they would then pay. Because when you said who enforces this, how does it work? Formerly, the government would have paid all the rent directly to the landlord, usually the local authority. Now they're only paying some of the rent, and the tenant is responsible for whether they pay that themselves. So it's like the government was funding social housing. They took that money away and they say tenants are supposed to make up the shortfall.
I don't understand how they figure out the equation. If they're giving you a block grant from the national government to that local authority, it's based on some assessment of how many people are going to have their benefits reduced, no?
Yeah.
So if they're wrong, how does that rectify? You're saying if they're wrong, the local council just has to eat it?
Yeah, I think so.
But there's absolutely no accountability for the ambiguity of their regulation.
Yeah. The The money will not
Doesn't make
money
sense.
for it.
Doesn't make common sense to me. And why would a council put up with that arbitrary setting of the level before they determine what the fair apportionment of the bedroom tax is?
Because I think they want to play ball with the government. They feel that they've got to because they're civil servants and then they get funding from the guys at the top. Scotland is not in charge of its welfare money, so it has actually no decision. It can make decision on its own over housing law, but it cannot make decision on its own when it comes down to welfare, to the welfare money, to that big budget every year that's coming every year. And I think this is why councils in Scotland cannot rock the ball where Westminster is concerned. The other thing that is very, very disturbing, and I find this out at the beginning of last week, is that the Parliament, Scottish Parliament voted no to the bedroom tax. I think 2 MSPs voted yes, and I can't remember if there were any exemptions, abstentions, I beg your pardon. But it definitely, the message was very strongly no, and yet the Westminster government went beyond that. So the way I'm understanding when I got in touch with Strasbourg and the European Commission on Human Rights, is that Westminster has broken all the rules imaginable. And now he wants to get out of the ETC, he wants to get out of human rights thingies, and he wants to push along very, very quickly amendments to the UK Bill of Rights. And you can surely well understand because it's broken so many rules that will have no effect on the issues in British society.
So just treat me as somebody who's not from here, which is actually true. So if Westminster doesn't give you the right amount of money to, is it Scotland or is it Edinburgh?
Scotland.
Okay, to Scotland. Does Scotland have any avenue of appeal for that level of money? James, thank you. Any lifeline?
Not totally direct answer. The Scottish Parliament does have the capability of legislating so that the debt that individuals would approve or the individuals they could approve whether the tax. They could, the Scottish Parliament could legislate so that debt can be classified as personal debt as opposed to household debt, which, because of previous existing laws here, that would mean no one was evicted as a result of rent arrears because of this tax. But the problem would then be that the housing associations, the social housing landlords, could themselves go bankrupt then because of their landlords are still due the same amount of money from that property, but central government won't pay the rent any longer, or won't pay the full amount. So I mean, it's not just bad for individuals, you know, and mainly disabled people as well. It's also an attempt to bankrupt the social housing landlords so that they can then be sold off to the private sector.
I think, see, to answer your question, if someone was subject to one of the exemptions that the UK government has allowed, like say in Afghanistan and came back, then the council would probably be able to get that from the central government. However, there are very, very few exemptions, and there are much wider circumstances where people need the bedroom, where any kind of common sense, local authority looking at it recognise that, and probably, quite possibly, a core human rights law would recognise it as well.
Yeah, how about these areas where there's a conflict between the taxing law and other laws? Are there laws that protect us?
Yeah, I mean that will have to be challenged in court. That hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. There are going to be court challenges about it. But
the only way to resolve this, in your view, is to have to go to court.
Well, that's one way to resolve it. The other thing I was going to say about this thing about there not being enough exemptions, like so that sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. It's so complicated.
Right, that whole table has this issue,
The other thing is that we've been talking about this reclassification thing is because the government has said there is no rules in their legislation about what is a bedroom. It doesn't say a bedroom is this, it's this size, anything like that. They say we take the landlord's say so for what a bedroom is. So that's where the campaign towards the local because they can't get more exemptions. If they say, you know, this person has a disability, they should have an extra room, the government won't listen to that. But what they could potentially just go, right, it's not bedroom. We're reclassifying our houses, and some landlords have done that. And so the government is then forced under the terms of their own legislation to fund those properties that they did. Now the reason that a lot of landlords don't want to do that is it then affects other revenue streams. You know, they suddenly have got this really one bedroom house instead of two bedroom houses. It causes them other problems. But that's the only way, while it still exists, of getting more people into the government's bracket of people that will fund their rent for them.
Yeah, you're going to go.
Just the other body on that issue, I spoke to housing board about this yesterday, about sort of, you know, getting room classifications, how you actually enforce that. I don't know how you actually sort of get that sorted, like, because if a housing association or two or three or four or five go out and say, right, these rooms are all going to be reclassified, then the government will crack down on that pretty quickly by the making them all housing with the eyes got to. So how that actually is going to, I mean, the way that I kind of thought about it, going to sort of more, I think it would be sort of like, it would be like sort of, you know, two-stage campaign would be sort of, if you're a council that has housing associations, would be putting pressure on your housing association to do that, and then have people just prompt the process themselves. I think it's how it's happened in some councils in England, where they've had the prompt, and then the role of sort of like community campaigners would be getting people to go and do the housing association, go to the local council, and then do it themselves. And that would be really sort of that way, and that's where so the pressure's coming from an independent body rather than people who are actually put in place by the government or the housing association. Does that make sense?
I've heard 2 days ago of a housing association in England called Genesis, and they basically have sent letters to their tenants long before they've been activated in form of debt, asking them to leave their premises because they know very well that the rents are overinflated. So on top of out of an overinflated rent, they've got the added bedroom tax, so they expect the tenants, they should expect the tenant to go into debt. So long before the tenants have had the time to go into debt, they're actually kicking the tenants out. And there is
Is that
in
legal?
London that is actually trying to sort this out.
Is that legal?
No, it shouldn't be illegal, but nothing is being done. This one group is trying to get a petition, to get people active and do something on that to sort of stop Genesis from going around kicking out residents before we give them a lot of time to get into bed. Now, the way also that we've been looking at it here is that they have human law rights issues, so liberty in England and Amnesty International are not involved, as well as Global Centre. But we know also that if the tenants, more and more tenants, will be evicted. So supposedly that if they are evicted and they find themselves homeless, they're going to have to be rehomed. And there's not enough one-bedroom property. There's not enough suitable accommodation for everybody. So they're going to have to go into a private landlord accommodation, but the rents are much higher. So the benefit, the welfare bill is actually going to rise. But what's going to happen is basically the taxpayer is going to subsidize the private landlord. It's going to cause even more chaos financially for the British economy. I mean,
I got you. Right.
it's just staggering.
Let's have some other comments. We've heard a lot from Christine.
I was going to say, in this situation, you've really had experience of this type of lockdown before. What would ACORN's reaction be? I mean, what avenue would you take here?
Well, that's why it's an exercise in working on it together. What is the constituency here? Let's get back to our original principles, just so we're all clear on the same page. So who and what is the constituency we're trying to organize here?
People in under-occupied housing.
And what kind of income do they make? These are low-income families. And they're all in social housing? No.
Yeah, yes.
An overlay it's kind of important, right? I mean, we're going to organize people.
And all the line of benefits to be
I'm
around.
sorry, James.
All the line of benefits to be raised.
That's not true, because like, I think benefits, if I go sick, then I'll be on that. I'm going to pay around normally, but I think it applies to everybody in social housing, because any of us could go off, get sick, and lose our jobs, and then we're like, on housing benefit at that point. At the point where we're most like stressed and sick already. And I think it also affects like private, because it's going to put additional pressure onto private housing, because there's a surplus of 2-bedroom flats in social housing, but there's no 1-bedrooms. So,
And it's all, okay, so it's all over the country, it's low income, below what income? How low is the low income involved? Huh?
It's usually hours of work, people over 60 hours of work,
Yeah.
start claiming benefits. So I can't remember the amount of pounds.
There are people in Richmond that do work.
Yeah, I was going to say that because the majority of people in the constituency are people out of work, however, maybe a quarter of them are low-paying people whose wages don't make enough to cover their rent.
About 10K, was it?
10 grand? 10,000 pounds or? Okay, so is that constituency currently organized by anyone?
No, I believe.
So they don't have an organization.
We know that there are tenants associations, but they're largely more of them. I mean, I'm a chair of a tenants association, and
You can speak for how dead they are.
so I can speak for how I was involved in the Edinburgh Tenants Federation, which Christine was mentioning, and these tenants groups are not very well connected, generally speaking, with the members of their community and with their tenants and things like that. So it's
Liz?
It's also probably worth mentioning that one of the quite important exemptions for this particular case is age. So if you're over 65, because my grand is in social housing, she's 90, she's fine, she's over 65, but I think that's quite a key factor in the organisations, because I think the older members of this constituency are fairly organised in the tenants associations that John was speaking about, but because most of these are around the age of exemption, they're less likely to be in this constituency.
Which is a deliberate move by the government. Like, the people in this constituency who are most likely to have organising experience and be in organisations are exempt.
They probably had a discussion a lot like this.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how not to have people in their face and in their offices.
On the 13th of March, we organised Edinburgh into 4 groups. With Billy Black, who is a member of one of the big unions, I think it's Unison. And the city of Edinburgh was organised into four corners, north, south, east, west. And basically we started into different parts of Edinburgh to fight together against cats.
Okay, so this is the constituency. We now know that there are very few inherent indigenous organizations that are already in place to deal with this. And targets, we've already discussed, and those targets include what? Somebody said housing associations. I know there's a disagreement about some of these targets, but that's a possible target in some cases. No, yes.
yeah, housing association and the
Landlords, local councils, Scottish government. And Christine has mentioned a number of times things happening elsewhere in the UK. Are there other people that we hear in the wind or organizing about this terrible situation, just as we're talking about organizing? Is the union connected to these people?
Yeah.
Do we know if there's any other strategies they're using that we're not using to inform what we're doing?
Because the speaker in England who the classification thing is it actually sort of saying that they basically what they do is they rely on tenants that are wrong thing with Elizabeth this spot. They require tenants to prompt the thing to actually start. So tenants go to the local council and say, we classify my room, and then we look at it on a case by case basis to classify the rooms. And that's only, you do actually get money straight from central government if that happens, don't you? But
Oh, sorry, yes, yes,
Yes,
yes,
yes, that would be like solved, basically, in that case.
Edinburgh Scotland, Liverpool, they've got a really strong group. They've been organising now for 6 months, I think it goes about 6 months. They've managed to get one housing associations to do the reclassification thing, and they're like,
Liverpool's the one where they were much more on the ball and saw this coming before all the rest of the. But I mean, there's, because I think part of the reason is they haven't all run, like a lot of benefit changes, they haven't kind of lead in and they kind of slowly lead up to it. This is all like straight away, thousands of people will suddenly due money. So as a result, there is stuff happening about it everywhere, like loads of communities where there are normal meetings and things like that. People are spontaneously starting to try to organise.
So is it at least theoretically possible that if y'all were able to figure out a viable campaign seems to be working, that it might attract additional adherence throughout the country? There might be a movement that might be possible from effective action? Because that's obviously interesting, and we're not as siloed out. All health are great roots, right? I mean, in theory. I mean, we've already covered how many times people have ever seen a victory, but you know, a movement's something special.
This Conservative government have tried so many, massive changes all at one time, and for them, if they occasionally get paying back on a shoot here and a shoot there, but they have done returns. So some of them has just been like they had a tax on hot foods, and it's so
Tax on orphans, did you say? No.
Hot food.
Oh, Oxford.
Hot food.
Damn, they're attacking orphans now? Can't we get a break in this country?
The pasty tax, the toasty tax, different things that they've done U-turns on when it's been really unpopular. What they can count on with this measure is there's a huge climate of hostility to benefit claims. There's misperceptions about people living in mansions and claiming out benefits. So pressurising the London government, making it seem like it will be toxic for them, they will lose their life. But I think because for some many of the voters, this is actually a popular policy because it deals with Brexit issues.
So there's a question over here about what are other experiences with similar kinds of issues elsewhere. So there is an organizing theory in these kinds of situations that was largely promoted by Dick Cloward and Fran Piven in the late 60s in the welfare rights and tenant movements, and hasn't. But it was based on you make change by creating a crisis. And the crisis, when it affected benefit payments, would be whether or not you can create such a crisis of demand. And obviously this was a different time both in the UK and the United States where there was at least some sensitivity to social unrest and, all hell breaking loose in the 60s. So you would create a crisis that would break the bank. And if the bank was broken, in other words, so many people applying for the benefit that they were legally eligible for and weren't getting, that by being forced to have to give the benefit because of equal protection in the law, whatever, they would have to then increase drastically the financing for welfare payments of all kinds in order to satisfy the legal entitlements. Follow me? And part of the lingering issues that you hear, still, if you ever read, the New York Times or Washington Post or whatever, this whole argument about entitlements goes back to fundamentally whether or not there are legal rights to benefits or whether or not all benefits are discretionary. Our fight on the progressive side of the line is always that benefits are entitlements, that there has to be a legal regime which governs not discretionary decisions by social workers, local authorities, or whatever that willy-nilly, henny-penny decide who gets and who doesn't get. So what we always try to win is an entitlement to a minimum standard of like law of benefits. What they always try to do is protect the discretionary ability. So one theory and some evidence in some situations for it is if you essentially flood, in this context, if we flooded local housing offices or whoever has the discretion, local council offices around demands that we be given the exemption whatever, I forget all the terms used, that housing discretionary, whatever. But there would be so many of these demands by so many tens of thousands of people, and there would be the anger and action that goes with making these demands in a coordinated, cohesive fashion, that you might be able to prompt change. And here are the problems with that. And that could be worth doing. The reason I asked about where the rest of the country is at is I've had a lot of experience blowing up a particular city which is too far from the capital of the state before you may have created, you know, a huge mess in, say, Springfield, Massachusetts, but you're 2 hours away from Boston, and Boston's where the capital is, so you can't move the capital. Essentially, you could blow up Scotland, and Westminster just tells you to fry, or worse, you know, whatever you would say. So the question, it's sort of interesting to me if there may be other people doing other things elsewhere, because we go crazy up here in Scotland, we might find people adapting. And the reason I was curious if the unions are involved with this, it becomes easier, back to the point people made about communication and outreach, if there's, you know, existing capacity which has a common mutual interest that we would have in mobilizing people around this campaign, then it's easier to have it catch fire and go countrywide as opposed to just getting ghettoed out in Scotland. But that's the theory. To implement this kind of campaign, it's back to the minimum standards. It's how do you take these little atomized, individual, personal problems that we talked about this morning and convert them into being a political issue. And part of how you do that is through numbers. How many people you can get and what kind of tactical delay. In winning sub-campaigns like this, I would hit an office the first day, you know, welfare office, the first day of 50 people, and I'd move up Monday through Friday until I had 500 people turning the same forms in. So the first day, they're not sure what to do with it. There's some press attention and what's happening. Second day there's 100, the third day there's 200, then 350, then 500. Basically, you try to create or manufacture a sense of movement in that local office so that by the end of the week, you know, they're calling whoever runs the place. So if you're in Scotland, they're calling Westminster. We have a problem. This is really an issue in Scotland. This is out of control for the Conservatives or whoever. But that's, I'm going past my scope here. But how you do it is essentially create a system of tactics within that strategy that allow you to create enough pressure that you finally get somebody to move. What does that? I don't know what I'm saying works in this context at all. But that's how you do it. Pick the target, put the mass base there, and then try to force them either to make a decision, in which case you run a different minimum standard, and they worry about how to get paid back by the central government, or they have to join with you and take it into Westminster to try to change the way in which this bedroom tax is. But the bedroom tax is being collected now, or people's benefits are being reduced over the last 6 months all throughout the country.
It's only just started on April 1st, so since April 1st this year. They came in.
So 5 weeks ago?
Yeah.
So it's still immediate?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was about to say, you know, could be a problem. People are already, you know, adapted to living with less. Well, so it's very timely then. What the heck?
I'm not sure how well we put ahead of things because nearly 11,000 disabled people are committing suicide over the welfare reforms because we felt picked on, we felt harassed and degraded when we went to the check-up at us. For example, as people say that their living standards would drop so drastically.
And I took it back. I said if it had been going 6 months, you would have problems arguing it was immediate enough that it had to be action, that therefore it was a crisis. Be fairly clear you're a manufacturing crisis. Within 5 weeks, if you were able to move fairly quickly, it's still people moving to react in some politically volatile situation. So we're not disagreeing, we're actually agreeing. I made a mistake. Liz?
There's actually as well, I think, like, there's been not huge wins, but it is also a campaign where various small concessions have been won at local level, like various, like, one of the things that people will be pushing for is for councils to say, we're not going to evict anybody because of the bedroom tax. And those resolutions have been passed by a number of different councils, including Edinburgh councils, as a result of petitioning. So, I mean, it's not getting rid of
you don't, so it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of paying tax, it's benefits are good, so you've already paid. So there's no debt involved. If you're not evicted, it's not like you have a debt, you're just not evicted, is that?
No, sorry, it's like, formerly, your rent would have been paid, like, the idea that you pay rent is in some ways a fiction, because the government would pay the landlord. Now the government only pays a portion of that, the rent minus that 14%, and that responsibility is on the tenant to then go and pay it to the housing association, to the council. And if they don't do that, if they can't afford to do that, then they'll start to accrue debt.
So,
eventually the debt gets to the
okay,
level
so
where they get to.
now I'm clear. So what we need the council to do is not only not evict, but also to wipe out the debt. Okay, so that was what I was stumbling on. Okay, so, and why, is there any reason they could not wipe out the debt?
Because that's the funding that they need in order to maintain social housing is paid for through the rent was formerly paid by housing benefit. Now that's been reduced, the social housing sector is like what the government, in my view, is able to do here, like the whole thing about spare rooms and what's happening to tenants is for them it's a spectacular distraction tactic because everyone's talking about should tenants have a spare room, whatever. When actually the real issue is they want to destroy social housing because they've reduced the funding the central government puts into social housing. And like I was at a meeting in Edinburgh where the council took a decision on no elections policy, and he basically said he was like, well, if it's for a couple of years and then there's a change of government in some way, however, and we can get it fixed that way, then we can find money to keep the system afloat for a couple of years. But if it goes beyond that, we as a council are going to be in crisis in being able to maintain our housing stock. Because that is how it's paid for. Basically, it's the rent that was formerly paid by central government.
And when's the next time the question of presenting government comes to play?
2 years.
The way that this guy put it, next year there's the independence referendum in Scotland, and the year following that, if Scotland is still part of the UK, there will be a UK general election. So those are the two. He was a Labour councillor, he kind of went, if we get or if it's a Labour government. Either way, there will be some solution to it, but otherwise, it's going to be a crisis for the council.
The Edinburgh thing is quite circumstantial because their word is we have made reasonable attempts to pay to make up the shortfall, then they're okay, but reasonable, what does that mean? Does that mean you have to like spend less on your food bill or selling television and it's still kind of attacking on, we haven't got like a kind of poverty standard in that way. And
John?
Well, that's one sounds very standards thing will come in reasonable. We can open that up as reasonable is just can you if we want me if we have a campaign like it. But the issue in Scotland would be we wouldn't need a change of government necessarily. The Scottish government can introduce they have discretion over council tax, so they can increase council tax. They can include another top band, so they could have. I was chatting to another guy about we were chatting probably the other night mansion tax. So people with a property of like more than £1 million, they can have another council tax band, which could be that band could be high enough to cover all of the losses local authorities are making, and that could raise the money so housing associations could be there without they wouldn't have the shortfall in revenue. So it's definitely maybe England will struggle. They have to look to a change of government, but in Scotland we could probably manage it. Anyway.
So we could actually charge a higher tax because they have too many bedrooms, as opposed to a lower bedroom. So it could be the reverse bedroom tax or something. Or if they have 5 bathrooms, maybe a bathroom tax. Get those engineers.
If we could all of them close to the whole thing because at London level they refused to look like they said it would be bad for the economy. There's no way we can consider tax mansions, but we can take money away from people who are means testing to be poor.
Right. Go on. Welcome to neoliberalism, but so interesting. You have a huge campaign that you could have. You might move thousands of people. I don't know in this level of constituency how many people.
About 150 people in Scotland.
Okay, that's 100,000. Well, my fisherman friend, that's a lot of fish in that. You can find them pretty easily, I bet. Where's my constituent?
They'll also tend to be quite geographically concentrated in some places because it will be areas that are covered in social housing. So like, if you go to the right places, then it's like nearly everyone you
Yeah,
talk
you
to.
go door to door,
Yeah.
so to speak. So, but you have to convince people that they could actually win. Could you do that? So, this is how we roll.
I mean, I can tell by some people's faces that, I'm not just being an optimist. I'm not an optimist by character. I do think we can do better facts because I've never been involved in any campaign. This is unprecedented. Like the housing association and local councils themselves are even speaking out to say this policy is the same. We can't work. There's lots of institutions, legal organisations, citizens' rights organisations, such as, all the tweeted voice threats, but across the board, everyone seems pretty switched on.
I mean, more people have said the words bedroom tax to me since I walked into Scotland.
That's all this get.
People are really, there's no boundaries here, it's all bedroom tax. Bedroom tax.
Even in a lot of the newspapers that have built this climate of hostility to benefit claimants, even they have carried lots of stories about the tragic.
Well, for the sake of argument, let's say it might be possible to win. But to win, we've got clarity of the issues, we've got some sense of who you can pressure. What tactics will we use? Back to that question. We got a sense of a strategy. It's not all, tighten down. We could write a term paper on it and pass for our students, but, we might be able to get a couple thousand people rolling. But what tactics would we use? What would actually help spring this into the larger arena? Mass appeals?
Yeah.
I like that. Of course, I've done that. So, once again, we're dealing into my strength. Okay, mass appeals. Very part.
A lot of groups, including our group, setting up like anti-eviction boundaries to try and actually say we're not even allowed you to evict people. So that's a strategy that ties into kind of people's memories of the ballpark.
And what would happen if these, 50 people go in with their forms to the local, wherever office to get, them reconciled right then and wouldn't leave until they got a decision that something was going to happen, that they were going to get their exemption? What would happen?
I don't agree with that strategy.
Huh?
I don't actually agree with you.
I'm just asking what would happen. Then we'll decide whether or not anybody can.
I think they would definitely say we can't. I think they would say we can't deal with you today. We'll write back to you or something like that. And then ultimately, if you refuse to leave it, the whole place.
Does that happen often?
We don't agree with this strategy very much.
They would be very frightened of calling the police because there's so much popular support and so much popular anger about the veteran tax that they would, I think they would try very hard to say come back to individuals. They would try very hard to stop it being a mass meeting kind of thing. But I think we'd be a lot safer than normal just because of the amount of popular anger there is, and it would let the government's aware it's like a dinner or big door.
So how do the police deal with nonviolent protests here? Do they come in, just sweep in, arrest everybody, and paddywag you out? Do they come in, say, we're going to give you 10 minutes to make a decision whether or not we're going to arrest you? What's the rule of engagement here?
It depends how they feel.
Depends on how they feel.
They'll sometimes give you an opportunity to leave, and sometimes they won't. Please, in this country, behave as they want to, basically.
Oh, so it's a lot like the United States after all.
Warning, and they have an opportunity to leave, and then they'll arrest you. They don't always officially give that warning.
And it's breach of the peace is the kind of legislation that they use most of the
Yeah.
time to arrest people, and it's very, very vague. It's like, if you're breaching the peace, it's so vague. that it's great.
Breach of the peace, obstruction of justice, and assault of a police officer is kind of illegal.
Well, I would think assault on a police officer would be serious, no?
It's maybe you can sort of,
In the U.S., assault on a police officer, that's a felony. You're going to do time on that. Now, the rest is civil disobedience. That's a misdemeanor.
My experience from the anti-crowding campaigns in Fastlane and Barricade in Fastlane is that assaulting a police officer was so funny because it's about, is your body going floppy or really red shade? And I realised during the practice before going to Barricade in Fastlane that If you go really rigid, it makes it very difficult for the police to pick you up, to lift you, to carry you around. Whereas if you go off-road, it's quite easy.
And I missed it. And one of those or both of those is assault?
One, the really rigid is resisting the police. It's at least much more aggressive to the police.
Another thing
Well, it's an education being here. I appreciate all this.
Another thing you might do if we're going to go about arresting you, because all these things for the police are about intelligence gathering. So they often might do something where, right, you're in a building and you're occupied, right, everyone will believe that they're arrested. If you will walk past the video camera and say what your name and address is on film, you know, they're not going to go on and expect you to look how to deal with you basically to not be arrested.
But the point is that there's no real history of experience with this kind of a tactic here in Scotland, so it'd be very difficult in the very beginning to get people to try this, wouldn't it? Yeah. So you'd be pushing water upstream, which is not a good way to pick tactics. But so people would be willing to go in and turn in forms, they would be willing to stay there and push for some resolution, but when it got towards closing time, they would leave. And then they would say they're coming back in a certain number of days for a decision, or what would happen next? Just show me the movie so I understand.
Well, you were talking about escalation, so
right.
We come with a certain number of people and we'll be back next time with more people. So we wouldn't need to wait for the police and have that kind of issue for people. We could come back with a time with more people.
Right. The more you can control the battlefield, the more strength you have in putting pressure on. So instead of going to this, dance with the police, if you went in for a fixed amount of time and said you were coming back in a X number of days for the decision, then they have to worry how crazy you are, what you may do next. Will you have more people? Will there be more attention? Will there be press? Will there be political figures with you, or the local priest, or what? I mean, you still control the tactical momentum. That's very important. So there's some hands up. Was your hand up again? Yeah.
Yeah. No, first of all, I wanted to in a funny way disagree with you when you said it was how police were feeling. It's not how police are feeling, it's their assessment. It's like the chief who's assessment of what the situation on the ground is and the balance of power is. And it's also a lot up to we're occupying a building, it's up to the government building when they call the police and what they ask for. If they think that the balance of power is going to be an escalating situation, they won't go in hand in hand in the same way as if they think that it's just a bunch of stupid people with war.
Yeah, but Wade was asking what they do, and what I was saying was it depends on the situation.
It does depend on the situation.
It's not consistent.
If we can show, if they have reason to fear that it's going to escalate the situation, they'll behave very, very differently. So if we demonstrate or we give them reason to believe that there's a mass of people that are willing to kick off about this, and it's going to get worse for them, then they'll behave completely differently than if they think it's just a few isolated people who they can just arrest without anybody doing anything about.
To the degree people are angry about this, you want them to have the opportunity to express that anger. Because even if they don't win that day an exemption on their bedroom tax, how people will feel about continuing to be part of the action is different if they're able to at least believe they had voice. Believe that my God, we told them, we got, they were, and they'll talk about it forever like they won something. But what they really want is a way to channel and express real and poignant anger about that situation. That's very important because people do respond to anger. They respond to uncontrolled events. To the degree it all looks like a stage drama, and that's what too much of organizing tactics has devolved into in a lot of places in the world. If it looks like a stage drama or it's the same old they've seen before, it's a yawner. You're not going to feel that pressure on it. Boom.
I have all reservations with those tactics.
You said that.
The massive deals one, for example, massive deals is for local government and housing associations. That's who you target with that action. But they don't benefit from the bedroom tax either. They really don't for the big way we discussed earlier. Is what's going to get the debt having with the tenants constantly accruing debt. It's going to be really bad for them as well because they have to make up the shortfall or kick out those people and deal with the huge homeless problem in the case of councils anyway. So I don't know. I guess that I think a massive deals thing is a bit of an aggressive tactic. I would say that it would be that in itself would be an escalated tax. It would be you'd have to go and have a dialogue with them first. first, and then if they were resistant, you have to like sort of try and win the argument in a procedure, less aggressive way before going to the mass appeal, because mass appeals, that costs money as well to them. I think that is the next step there. We won't actually benefit from this.
Do you have a tactic you'd like to recommend?
No, because I've been struggling with this for a while.
Oh, okay, well, you need to have a horse to beat a horse. So,
I don't agree.
Is the thing with the mass appeal, feels that it's like people who are in the recently they've got to have to pay more, is that that's something that they can do as individuals to stop that
Right.
process?
you're trying to engage more people, that's your point? Yeah.
And not just that, like to people who are, in the risk of having to pay a load of extra money they don't have to be evicted, and the mass and the appeals that they can do to
Yeah,
evict a lot.
absolutely. I absolutely agree with appeals. Appeal is a tactic. If you feel it's very correct, but if you do like a mass appeal, like if you get everybody in an area to put in an appeal, those appeals cost money in process and stuff like that. I just feel like it's like as a first stage of a tactic, as a first stage escalation, that would be overly aggressive to people who don't actually benefit from the veteran tax either.
Okay, so
Yeah, I was just listening to the point that was made there, and everyone made it about how kind of in public rhetoric, it's a lot about people thinking that people better consider mentioned and things like that. So in some ways I feel like this campaign might be partly about changing the terms of discussion and kind of changing the representations of this issue. But maybe that could be also, as one of the tactics, a more creative approach that, for example, shows a lot of photos of people with spare bedrooms and kind of tells small snippets of personal stories that actually show that people that have spare bedrooms are not selected, but they're actually,
who are we moving with that?
Sorry?
That's an interesting idea. Who are we moving? Who are we talking to?
You would probably be targeting them more the rest of the public, so you'd probably be targeting public opinion.
So I think that's a very interesting point. It's not necessarily an argument against his tactics, it's an argument for how robust we need our communication strategy to be. We need to, part of the common campaign model views a target as a point. Here's our constituency. You win very few campaigns thinking that the only way you can go is just march right to the target and somehow they fall at your feet. That really doesn't happen much. So what you try to do is not only move in that way, but try to also activate as many other points of pressure on the target as you can. So one way you do that is exactly your point, which is you neutralize some of the public opinion. We already have, it sounds like, a fair amount. This is an issue that's already in the mainstream discussion by everybody. People have opinions. They have political and partisan views. But what they may not have is a clear understanding of why are we just sort of slackers and deadbeats and want a couple of pounds back, or what is it? So making, to the degree there's a robust media here, and I don't know if there is, trying to get the notion out that we can discredit their narrative by essentially being satirical, poking fun, communicating, you figure out what term you want to use, but getting that information out. We might do a leaflet like that and, go door to door one, weekend and leaflet the posh neighborhoods with this information saying there's about to be, increased tax on your bedrooms. Here's what ours look like. And it's, what, a broom closet. I don't know, the same kind of example of a storage room with somebody's wheelchair or whatever it is that are the most hyperbolic examples you have. But the whole point is whether or not there are other, so what goes in these boxes? Press, other organizations, organizations throughout the UK, labor, potential allies, talk about lawyers, whether or not you've got legal support, and fill as many as you want. The point is whether or not you can actually move them to put pressure directly on your target.
I take it UK as in the workers movement as opposed to the Labour Party.
Labor is a labor union.
Yeah.
We don't have a Labour Party, so I'm not thinking. But I assume you would get the Labour Party to back you. No? You know, over there, wouldn't it be great to have a Labour Party instead of like Democrats? But here, okay, same. You know, at the end of the day, justice is just us. So, okay, so that becomes, you know, all those ideas are important and they become part of a robust tactical arsenal of every kind of thing you want to do, and then how you time and sequence when you would put that out for another bump of pressure, when you would be sitting in that office turning in your forms before you did, when you've got something else happening, maybe a public hearing where you're inviting people to come give their stories about how ridiculous this is, and try to get as much as you can, whether or not you can move students. I mean, I guess, you know, here, there seem to be a lot of students, maybe just because we're right here on campus, but maybe the students, you know, young people out on the streets, I don't know.
Just really to follow up on that point, I think that's important. Maybe this constituency really is more than that 100,000 people, you know, because that's a minority. We talked about earlier how you need a majority. Yeah. If you're looking at all of Scotland, that's a small minority, but and you don't want it to be kind of stigmatised like, oh, it's just the people who are in social housing that want, you know, this has to be an issue that's relevant to those that aren't having to pay housing benefit and aren't going to have that reduced. If you're going to have a powerful campaign, I guess challenging that stigma, that narrative is part of the campaign, and perhaps challenging the discourse about what right it is. You know, sort of. I mean, I was just trying to think about what exactly that would be, but if it was like donate a spare bedroom, you know, donate a spare room, because now it's gone. If you're rich enough to have spare rooms, will you donate your spare room to someone who can't afford it? I mean, but that's because that's the change that happens. You know, it changes from a right for everyone to be able to have a house, and they can choose to do with what they want with those rooms, and then it becomes like another charitable model where those who can afford it can have extra rooms, and those that can't don't. And then you have a choice, like, do my neighbours down the road, do they have the same rights as me or not? It's a bigger issue.
I think it's important to raise them though, because there's not enough one-bedroom flats. Like there's a certain two-bedroom flats. That's why we all got allocated the two-bedroom flats, single person, everybody got allocated them. There's like certain two-bedroom flats because we want, you know what I mean? They're unsuitable for pretty much everybody. And there's not enough one-bedroom flats, and that's like one of the ones that you're paying bedroom tax, even if you've asked for a transfer, even if you're trying to move into a one-bedroom flat, you're still being charged it, and people aren't going to get a move. So it's not like you've got a choice in the matter, like you've been allocated it and you're stuck with it.
So the common framework of almost all campaigns, particularly those that involve money, is whether or not we can change the nature of the debate to be a question of rights or morality versus economics. As our friend here said, it almost always costs somebody money. If we have this conversation about money, you don't win those conversations. And the thousands of people you put on the street don't necessarily win a conversation about money, particularly in this economy. You have to be able to make the case in every way. Your point was good, her point was great. How we are right. That justice is on our side, that victory is inevitable, that the only moral solution is the one we're promoting. We have to have a sense of order in which the rightness of the issue trumps whether or not it happens to have a small ancillary cost. Because we're not going to say, you know, get allies by saying, okay, what will you pitch in money to make up for the fact that we just lost benefits? Now, they might be sympathetic to you, they might think that picture of the broom closet is not a bedroom, they might think you're getting screwed, they're not going to pitch up money to help you. So we have to somehow change the debate so that there's only one right thing to do, and that's the right thing that we're demanding. That everybody be treated equally, that everybody, you know, participate in whatever the entitlements are in an equal manner, and that those people who are responsible for making this right have to do so. If that's not in Scotland, it's in Westminster, then that's where we all have to be united, is getting Westminster to roll back the policy, change their decision, find a trap door that they can walk through, somehow modify or ameliorate the situations that we've been in. Those are all good points. So we've got a sense of a campaign, we've got a sense of some tactics, we've got some disagreement on tactics, but I mean, I think that's been well argued by all the points. We've got some notions of how we would mobilize other pressure points. Do we have the resources and capacity to engage in this campaign? Big sigh, James. I can hear that sigh all the way over here. Well, years ago, once upon a time, people believed that change came from a revolution of rising expectations, that if you oppressed people seriously enough, if the conditions were bad enough, eventually people would rise up to resist that. Well, hundreds of years of oppressing people really proved that basically people stay oppressed. They don't necessarily, except in almost impossibly random and miraculous and magical conditions, rise up and resist. So then the more current popular theory of how change is made is that a huge amount rests on resources and capacity. That you can have the same oppressive situations, you can have drastic movements for change in one case and none in another, based on whether or not there were resources and capacity, organizers, the way to support people, leadership, money, all those things that make for the engineering and mechanics of social change actually present in a situation. Pop, you had something happen. If you didn't have those things, more difficult. So unfortunately, we go round and round in circles. We're back to some, not exactly sustainability, but whether or not we could mobilize the resources and capacity to engage in this kind of campaign. So what do you think? And here we have a hardy band, with all of us come from all kinds of directions and places and spaces. We don't have an existing organization of this constituency that we can immediately go, get on a blower to call, see if they're really willing to come meet with us, because we got some great ideas for how to run this campaign. There is no down for us to talk to. I mean, awesome fact is them in this campaign. ACORN happens to be, a great organization that doesn't exist here. So, right now it's just a figment of people's bright eyes and, vivid imaginations, which is often quite enough to make change happen. But so, what would it take to get resources and capacity to make this happen? It sounds like we need to move quickly if we're going to stop this bellyaching about this. We got 5 weeks in. Once it's 5 months in, then they're not going to be worried. So there's a pop-up here in Edinburgh, there's a pop-up in Glasgow. Hope they don't spend too much time on that independence election. We'll see what happens after that. So you got to be willing and able to move quickly if you're going to move. What's the chance? John?
Well, I was kind of thinking of coming back to the stuff we were talking about in the morning session. So say we have we know what our constituency is, so we can find who some of the community leaders are, community activists are, people, movers and shakers in that constituency, have a conversation with them, bring them together as an organising committee, and then go through the steps maybe you were talking about. And then it would seem to me that the big issue that everyone would be talking about would quite obviously be the bedroom tax. So the public meeting where it comes along and voting on the issue would be, just be that's plan our action, that kind of thing. So it seems like we could do it that way.
Building a movement around a campaign is different than building a community organization. I should point that out. Actually, what I was describing, as I said, even on the short run, it would take 4 to 6 weeks to get to 3,000 people in sort of long form, detailed, 7, 8 minute conversations on the doors you'd be having, structure the conversation, That's how you build a community organization. Building a base that you can mobilize like this in a campaign is a much quicker process potentially, in which you're accelerating all of these elements. You're using flyers, you're using teams of door knockers that are sweeping door to door with people that are very quick rap. You're trying to call a meeting. You're abbreviating the people in terms of understanding the basic research and campaign demands, and they're essentially coming based on whether or not they're willing to support, participate, get the forms, and be part of that action. So it's different. It's based on immediate results. So I'm not saying don't do that. In fact, it sounds like the way people are talking about the bedroom tax, God help us if we don't do something soon. People are going to be in a terrible situation, and, you know, it's hard to live on, I mean, I don't know what the benefits are in the UK, but it's hard to live in any place I work on any level, public benefits anymore, the way it's all gone. But if it gets worse, that's terrible. That's even worse than worse, whatever the definition of that might be. So, it could be, you know, add water and stir on a much quicker plant. It's all the same elements, but it's just ratcheted up on steroids. Just a second. So yeah, you have the notion, you have the troops, you have enough people to put out there. And so that's Hilton or whatever. What happens in Glasgow? What happens around the rest of Edinburgh? What does it take to get, you know, stir this drink? Yeah.
Can I just ask?
You're working on that flyer though, right? We need that flyer out soon with those pictures. Yeah, are you on that today?
Now I was just wondering, I know that the Anti-Theft Coalition has been big in the past years and thinking about cities in Glasgow, but I haven't been involved, and I was just wondering how big is this coalition at the moment, and have they been organizing around the bedroom tax as well?
I've been going along to a lot of the bedroom tax stuff in Edinburgh, and the thing they don't do really is engage with the people who are directly affected. Like there's not been any door knocking. There's not been any sort of kind of mass action that everyone can participate in. It's been their experience, and it's exciting and stuff like that. It's really not. There's been lots of talking. There's been lots of public meetings. The first public meeting that happened for the whole of North Edinburgh had 100 people along, which is big for the area. I mean, we don't get meetings bigger than that. The next meeting, they just decided to do another public meeting, so it was 50. And the third public meeting was 5 people. So it's just kind of like people saw this kind of, the tactics seemed to just have some public meetings, and every public meeting was just, you know, everyone saying how bad the bedroom tax was, and saying there are these things that we potentially do, and, you know, or not, and then we had another meeting, and the same, and another meeting the same, and it just went all the way, really. So it's not really the, you know...
To get to another level, we need to move past the usual band of advocates.
Yeah.
As good a job as I'm sure they've done around a wide array of issues, and actually move constituency to have their own voice and to act in an engaged way and be able to express their anger and their demands. So that's the difference here. Yes, I'm sure, and most of those advocacy-based organizations, I would guess, would support us. Some would be uncomfortable, frankly. I mean, to all of a sudden have people speaking for themselves as opposed to people who are used to operating in a representative function and funded by whoever, and that's their JOB. I mean, you're going to have some conversations with your allies about why they should be supportive of this, because the last thing we want is people weaseling out the back as you're putting pressure on the target. They're saying, hey, you know, I can fix this for you. Why don't you call me? I don't think it's that serious. I'm going to fix it. You know, you don't want people out there, you know, pissing on your shoe while you're trying to, you know, light them on fire. I should probably say that in English, but whatever. You know, you can't say we don't speak colorfully in the U.S. We may not be able to communicate, but very colorful. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, once again, a good question, how to mobilize them so that there's an agreement. I think there must be huge frustration in the advocacy community about their ability to derail this bedroom tax. I mean, it's coming, it's in. All the arguments about its fairness have been exhausted, I would bet. So now there's a question, do they get away with it? And you're the only ones lying on the train tracks to try to stop the engine from rolling over.
On targets, one of the problems has been, slight problem is lots of good advice has come from government law centre based in Glasgow. A lot of the strategy that they advocate though is aimed at putting pressure on the Scottish government. And the reason for that is it's party political, because the guy who runs Scottish law centre is a Labour party. The Scottish government is run by the Scottish National Party.
Right.
So they are not interested in just trying to embarrass the Scottish
I mean, if you're moving the campaign, what could it hurt you if somebody else is singing your song? You want people to be supporting you. There's always a difference between transactional and transformative organizing. So in any political situation, a party, a union, the first impulse is always going to be transactional. How does it benefit them? How does it benefit their organizational interest? What advantage or what leverage does it give them in a particular situation against a normal definition of change in an opponent? So you deal with transactional relationships in every part of organizing, but your job has to be, if you were an organizer and trying to build this, how do you build something that's transformative? That's transformational. Now that changes the way the normal equation of power in politics works, and sometimes it changes people's, changes whole institution structure. But it doesn't hurt you to, you have to understand transactional politics and power, and that's part of what people have, sort of like your earlier argument. People have a lot of good reasons for being transactional. They don't think you're going to win. So why not play what they think are the marginal percentages to try to improve their position in the game, so to speak, as opposed to taking a chance that something drastic and radical or transformative might happen. Your business is still to try to make that transformation, how people, that constituency is seen, how benefits are structured, how the government relates in Westminster to here. You may have lots of different objectives you want to keep in mind rather than just sort of making a deal on the margins. But still, it never hurts to have as much support and much pressure on the target. For whatever reason you win, everybody will take credit if you win. But your point is win. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem we've had locally is, and I've got some more ideas from today, but I'll just tell you our strategy. We didn't have, it's very unclear what to do. People are really angry, and we've been discussing, there's no clear strategy. So we've, put together, a flyer, this is our plan of action, and, I'd love it to be critiqued, more positive ones come out, although we finally got these, 3,000 printed, so if anyone... We're going to be door knocking with them anyway. This is to support our door knocking to give everyone that we're speaking to and put through the doors people we don't speak to. So we had a lot of problems coming up with a good strategy as well. So we've founded on a few things. We've got the ECAP thing about getting an appeal, so that has got a lot of information about how to appeal and urging people to appeal, and also saying to people to come on to the meeting in order to find out how to appeal. We've got a meeting booked on the 30th of May, which is 2 days. It's a long enough away that we can build for it. It's also 2 days before the Glasgow demonstration. So hopefully I'll be able to get a mass of us going as a leader from where we live to the big march. But also
Is there writing on both sides of that flyer? Wow. That's not in my experience, a double-sided flyer. Is that common here? Wow. Well, the literacy rate here in the UK must be off the charts. Okay. We're all 25, 35 word people. So.
Well, we tried to keep it a bit brief, but it was really hard.
But that's why the paper was small.
So yeah, we've got a few things. So we're trying to get an anti-eviction poetry going in the area. So what we're going to be doing, that's what we're going to be talking to people about, we ask them to know about bedroom tax, and if they're affected by it, how they might be affected by it, even if they're being paying rent at the moment. Not the best flyer ever.
Doesn't matter, I'm just curious. Okay, go ahead. What's with it?
Yeah, the phone number's wrong, so we put the stamp all flyers, which is another reason why we probably mentioned them right there.
You mean the text 7 and 8 zeros?
Yeah, the number that's stamped above it is the actual number. So we've got a stamp now, so we can stamp these. And then, so we're asking people to appeal, but we haven't done this mass appeal. I think that's something we'll probably talk about in a meeting. And we're door knocking is that we want people to go along all together. That's it also kind of builds neighbourly spirit and stuff. All the stuff we've done is just been really, really good in terms of building kind of a sense of community and stuff. And we're also anti-eviction poetry is something we're really keen on. And then it's blocks of flats, so it'd be very hard for the shareholders to come in and zone to those up. So hopefully we'll be able to do something about that. But obviously that's really bad because if you get to the point where they're getting evicted and we're trying to defend them, then that's
alternative housing officers. We were able to like hand in this mass petition that had like a third of the number of houses, there was a third of them signed the petition, and that was the ones that we could get around from the door knocking. We got like a really good article in the local paper that said it was synthetic, so there's like people were kind of, we can't change things, but it's good to say something anyway. But yeah, it'd be really good if like, it's really hard to know. Like basically, I appreciate what James is saying, that we can win, and like, I wish I had his confidence, because if I had his confidence, I'd be a lot more powerful and would be able to go and say, yes, we can do it. As it is, I'm kind of like finding it hard to get involved with it at all, because it's like this psychological block of like, there's no point, we can't change it, it's too big, it's the government, they don't care, they don't care what's happening in Glasgow, and they want the mass evictions anyway, because they want people to be homeless, and they, you know, just want to reduce the redistributive effect of the state, so why do they care if there's mass evictions? So I like the idea of like also targeting people that will put additional pressure on them, and maybe we could like have actions where we're setting up like bedrooms and banks or something, or like, I don't know, something that's going to be a little bit more. But all these things are just spectacular. I mean, they're not kind of like saying it's actually like directing power towards the state, but obviously the state's a big target that we need to be losing it. So.
Okay there. Who's got to follow up on that one, huh? This.
I guess I was just going to say like, you know, like talked about doing like loads of really amazing stuff, and really, you know, like working really hard on. And I think that hard work is going on all over the place. And there's lots of people doing a lot of things, but like so again, for me, it goes back to sort of what we were talking about this morning about like building membership and building something that people can come back to, because I think there's that thing about like, you know, we like in ETAG we won stuff, and then we've still had members of ETAG, so people come back and we'll be like, what we're going to do next. And granted, we need more members and stuff, but you know, having that, well, actually, we've got this thing to come back to, I think is really important. And I think that, you know, campaign groups throughout this kind of austerity, you know, craft time that we're living through, have won various little things, but then disappeared, and that seems to be kind of what happened, like the Uncut movement, for example, like managed to change narrative around tax avoidance quite well, but then disappeared, and there was nothing for people to come back to. It didn't really, you know, things. So I think that like, so what we were talking about this morning about like building that membership alongside, you know, these kind of campaigns is really important, because it means that even if we don't win everything that we want, we might win something, and then we've got something to come back to.
I think that's an important point, about sort of like consistency. I think that's one of the big things that has completely lacked in general, and the whole sort of anti-austerity movement so far over the last sort of like 3 or 4 years has been so lack of consistency between different organisations and stuff like that. Well, like, the important part for me is that like, for things like pension tax, for example, I mean like, there's by the end of this year, this fiscal year, there'll be a huge transformative effect in society in the future welfare reform due to the introduction of universal credit. So we'll have more, as a welfare checks in medical, isn't it? You see a lump sum of money, am I correct in saying that? So we're going to have
It's a very small lump.
yeah.
Yeah, one lump.
Well, that's stuff, lumps of money at the start of each month. Rather than having like, we have now your rents put into your plans and stuff like that. Yeah. So we're going to get more sort of like welfare checks, which means that the entire landscape of how we challenge things like the bedroom tax is going to change really, really drastically. And so, for example, like if you've got one lump sum of money and then you say, well, I can't pay my rent, then you know, in order to make a legal challenge to that, then you know, when you look at it as one lump sum of money for everything, as a paycheck, it's much more harder to. People theorise, because obviously it's not contested yet, or theorising that it might be a lot more harder to challenge that sort of thing in court, rather than if you now actually allocated a sum of money for your rent and you can't pay it out of that allocated sum of money, which is a worry. And obviously, I think that's one of the great things for consistency is the fact that bedroom tax, to be honest with you, I'm not really that. I don't think this is the big fight. I don't think this is where you're going to see evictions, to be honest. I think where you're going to see evictions, where you're going to see the real need for a proper fight back is universal credit, and that's where we're going to see the real kickers. I think bedroom tax is a good issue, but I think it's a good issue insofar as it's got like quite a lot of like public consciousness about it, but in terms of its actual effect on society, I don't think it's as great as people are making it out to be. But it is a good thing to get people into actually building a community
Well, if it helps build an organization that's able to fight on other issues, that's part of the point.
I mean, I think a couple of things that you mentioned in the first half, I'm saying like a teacher's tenure, a couple of things from the first half, like this, which is prioritisation. I mean, like the universal credit, you know, which is right, it's going to be an absolute disaster for, you know, people, low-income people across the country. But it's still been on the horizon, whereas we've got the veteran tax in the here and now, and I do believe that, you know, it's possible to get a result on it. I think that the small, the realisable goals things, even if those are small sometimes, so, you know, that whole story of thing goal, that goal kind of applies, like, set yourself the goal of, you know, having a public meeting, I'm sure some of you done that, having a public meeting, having a petition, having a protest or a ticket at a housing association to put pressure then working towards the goal of that housing association declaring they won't make any evictions. You know, that's a victory. There's one that people in other parts of the UK have done. You know, why can't we do that in Glasgow, Edinburgh, elsewhere in Scotland? Find a way to play off the XNP versus Labour so that the Scottish Government, you know, does what they can. And then we'll start a momentum, we'll start to build because those, you know, the housing associations, the councils, because of the position they are, they themselves will have to use some of their might then to go to central government and fight it. So, you know, it can be very overwhelming if, you know, break it down and it makes any forces for yourself.
I'm with you. Thanks for repeating what I said in the morning. We're going to have a test and everybody's going to be graded. James, he's solid. He's ready. He's taking notes. Anybody needs them. So look, if this were a real meeting of a real ACORN group, we'd be talking about next steps. How do you really implement this? How do you make decisions? So you'd be talking about things like, well, if we've got this whole Glasgow caucus, and we've got a bunch of people in Edinburgh, they're going to probably talk about this, on the train, bus, I don't know how you come, but they'll be talking about it as they go back. As you leave this meeting, hopefully, you'll have some conversations with, I guess we have everybody's name, addresses, and cell phones, and emails. So hopefully you'll be talking about what comes next, what becomes the real decision about how to do it. How do you keep in touch with each other? Is there a way to get this momentum building in both places? Are there other places that aren't here? Aberdeen, what's the one that starts with D? Dundee. You know, other places in Scotland. You know, somebody was saying, I think you were, Christine, that you knew other people elsewhere in the UK. Is there any kind of a reach out you can do to say, hey, you know, look, we were up here at the fancy school and we were talking about this, that, and the other. And people are talking about doing some other things. We'd be curious what you're doing. Can we keep in touch? If we get something happening here, what's your interest? Is there a meeting we might have? Do a Skype thing? Have a closed Facebook group? I don't know what you want to do. But I do think you want to figure out, we got our man from Unite, right? Unite's talking about this, obviously. You seem pretty well informed. What are they really putting in? Are there resources? Is there staffing already, you know, stirring around on this? Can we get a little help already from the brothers and sisters? I don't know. Yeah, I certainly need it. Hey, don't swallow the ass. Boy, I went too fast. You know, and that's the trick about door knocking. Never make the mistake of talking through what you're hearing. And that's the most common way that people swallow the ass. They'll say, you know, dues is 10 pounds a month. And then they won't stop. They'll just keep talking. Well, missed that 10 pounds, you know. Peer person on the other end just sort of missed that pitch, you know. Don't have to pay the 10 pounds. They kept talking. So, oh yeah, about that, yeah, I'll join the meeting. So, you know, silence is golden, but yeah. So what help do you have to put in?
I mean, when we were talking before about resources and capacity, like it's maybe just worth saying for 1 minute what it is that I do with you, because as your boss said, like this is like a complex multi-year plan the government has to reform up. The bedroom tax is one portion of it's taking place now. There's a whole lot of worse stuff to come in a few months' time and the next year.
Don't you love the name for it? Universal credit? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
That actually sounds like, hey, we're going to get credit. But you're actually losing money or something? I mean, crazy.
So what
basic community labor kind of
Yeah.
formations. Okay.
Yeah, and we've been already pretty active around veteran tax. In some places, directly organising meetings on
Scotland-wide, countrywide, what?
Mainly in Glasgow, but also all over the place.
So how many of them are you like this?
For staff, there's one member of me. I'm one member of the staff as well.
Speaking, huh? Okay, gotcha.
So there's like one of me in each of the regions of the union throughout the UK, basically. So this is
How many regions are there?
I think there's maybe like 10 of us throughout the UK.
Okay, well that's something.
Plus there's like a support unit in London as well.
What is support unit? Research?
Yeah, research and
database? Okay.
yeah, people that can do bits and bobs,
Communications.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like a win.
Yeah, and it would, I mean, in Scotland we've been very active, either in organising things ourselves or just, like printing leaflets locally, like also just getting local groups of people who are organising, saying we're a kind of call where you can come and get resources from town and stuff. Other places in the UK where they already have this reclassification, unions have been quite important in the campaign there, I think. I definitely think Nottingham is one of the councils that's done this reclassification thing. It was quite important for there.
And you can get more information to us about the success they had, because obviously anytime we can claim a precedent somewhere else within the national system, it helps us spread whatever the handles are here.
I'm hoping to bring my group up from Nottingham to talk about the campaign they had about reclassification. Give people a bit of the experience of what worked there, and see if it could be applied here as well.
So,
Yeah.
so some time with us now. And so how many people signed up on this other program?
I'm not sure about UK-wide. It's still in the hundreds. It's maybe a couple of hundred as well. It's a
Great program.
yeah, it's a pretty new thing. There's a good few thousand across the UK.
What are the dues?
50 pence a week. So £2 a month.
£2 a month. Okay.
There's actually it was here as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, some of the people, there's some overlap with the people that are organising ACORN, who are also members of this as well.
Great. Hey. Mr. I have reservations then. And reservations duly noted. Very important contribution. Okay, well this is helpful. Are there other resources and capacity?
I think in Edinburgh there are a few anti-bugs groups have sprung up in the last couple of years. Most of them are local based.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of groups, but I think they do struggle with some of the kind of things we're talking about this meeting. So sending us some ideas and lots of things we can bring to the table. I think. But yeah, there's I think how many there's anti-veteran tax campaign groups started quite good across the city. I think maybe 6 or 8. It's a core of activists mainly. Some other meetings to many activists. There's not so many people who are directly affected who are involved in the campaign and stuff. So it's kind of they're really struggling to reach the grassroots of the great constituency. But yeah, there's definitely lots of contact, lots of really connected people who go cooperating with any kind of tax activity. Unions, quite lots of contacts with unions here in Edinburgh. So there's definitely lots of resources that are happening. It's really we can bring that together probably if we think this is a campaign.
Obviously the thing that we do with the union is helpful. The unions generally, like a lot of places where there's a local group, will be like a local trade union council, so that's a partnership of all local unions. The other one's been an important resource, like it's been mentioned lots of times, has been law centres, like not-for-profit, like community places where people can go and get legal advice and things like that, which a lot of those have actually took quite an active campaign role in this as well.
Really? Good. And so they're helpful if there are threats of eviction?
Yeah.
And are they needs-based in terms of qualification for legal assistance? Okay.
Although that's another thing the government is happening at the moment, is people's ability to access funding for legal representation.
Yeah, just waves of happy news here. Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. We better grab these resources while there are still resources. You know, it sounds like it's a quickly shrinking pie.
Well, resources in Western Scotland as big bedroom tax brokers and top heavy. So Sheridan.
There's a self-proclaimed Scottish Federation of bedroom tax campaigns. I would contend that it's a front for a far-right party. But it still has had a conference with over 100 people at it. You know, so there's there have been a series of meetings, some related to that, some not, across Scotland. You know, that 50, 60, 70, sometimes more people are, and these are people who never normally come to anything, some of them that will be to anything like that, never, which is interesting. So obviously we want a qualified Scottish Federation, you know, to link up with people outside, but that's, you know, that has to happen organically. You have to have local groups first.
Exactly, and I think just to underscore that, trying to figure out how to translate this into English, there's an expression I use in Organizing the United States, and so a lot of people down in the United States, if you go towards the west, it's dry, the east is wet. So in terms of populating the western part of the United States, I was actually born in Laramie, Wyoming, which is in the west. They would argue that rain follows the plow. If you wanted to own land and you had never had land, if you just go and start breaking the prairie, it would start raining. Well, that turned out to be totally false. But one thing that is true about rain, so this is why, I keep attention of this in the United States. So yeah, that's a lie, but there's a lot of lies about developing America. But what's true about organizing is that rain does follow the plow. If you're moving, resources will catch up with you. If you're not moving and waiting for the resources, take my word for this, resources will never come. But if you go out there and start organizing, then it is easier to get other people to follow, other people to put in resources to demand not only help out, but we were talking to a Central Labor Council guy last night, very supportive here, just would probably do as little as possible until something was really moving and they would want to be part of it, I think. And that's not to say anything pejorative about him, he was great, but that's just the way change works. I mean, if we're moving, people will move with us. If we're not moving, if we're just running around between Glasgow and Edinburgh talking about it, well, then it's pretty much, that's where it's going to stop. What else on this campaign?
I had an idea ages ago, so this takes back to what somebody was saying about how do you broaden the constituency and make it beyond just the people who are on housing benefit, basically, because when you go out into places that are predominantly social housing and talk to people about this, I think the vast majority of people go, yes, they agree with you. Most people get it in the right areas anyway. And then there's a minority of people who will be like, well, I pay my full rent, so why should anybody else get it? And the thing you have to say to those people as well, like what I was trying to say before is that it isn't actually about the rightness or wrongness of spare rooms. That's not what the government is thinking about. The government is thinking about their desire to destroy social housing. And what's going to happen if social housing is being funded, what's going to happen to your house? What's going to happen to your repairs? What's going to happen when your housing association goes bankrupt? Like, it's important to try and, to some extent, like, although it's very motivating, it's very powerful to tell the stories of people who are suffering because of this, but at the same time, you have to kind of move on from the territory of, well, do we have a right to have social housing? Is there going to be social housing in the future? If you live in a social house, what's going to happen to your house as a result of this? Even if you do pay full rent?
And I can't say how important that is. I actually, and this was a key to building a mass organization for us in ACORN. There's a lot of talk about how self-interest is the primary motivation for people to organize. And that's actually not true. Although it has a lot of currency and there's whole schools of organizing, a lot of methodology that is built up on elaborate rationalization of self-interest. Self-interest is important. There's no doubt. People do respond to self-interest if you can frame it right. But almost more powerfully, and it's a little bit like we're talking about dues, that, self-interest would say that the people who would least pay not true at all based on surveys. People respond to mutual interests actually more rapidly and more fully than they do to self-interest. People are almost embarrassed about self-interest. That's not to say they don't care about it or they won't, in many cases, act in that way. But the notion of mutuality and why it's important for everyone to act before they're hit, or in some cases, it's sort of interesting if you do studies of leadership that emerge in community organizations. Sometimes the people with the least self-interest and the least personal issues end up wanting to give back to the community more and therefore end up in leadership positions doing more work to build an organization. It's not necessarily those people who are suffering the worst that will respond the most aggressively. The anger may be very deeply seated and if somebody doesn't, they're going to try to pay the fortune goes down. But the notion of moving the narrative so that you've got a good way to organize people that are not directly impacted is very, very critical, I would say. It's a very good point.
In terms of resources, I suppose I just wanted to add in this thing about working in and against the state, and that community workers and social workers will have hours. They will have a remit now, well, they do have a remit now anyway, don't know, to respond to welfare reform. They will be given time from the local authority to put their pay time into doing that. And whether that's just putting a plaster over the crack or not, doesn't matter in the sense that you can always ask, and you can just say to your local community learning and development worker or your local social worker or local area coordinator, what are you doing about responding to welfare reform? And just see what time they can put into it. And if nothing else, they could help. They can't be political with a big P like you were saying earlier, but they are political with a small p. And they can find ways of supporting groups and supporting education in that process.
Very good, excellent. And are there lots of social workers who are in that situation?
You have, there's 32, there's maybe 35 community learning development workers across the city, and then there'll be more social workers than that.
Sounds like that's worth the climb. Good. One of my lifetime commitments is fight bored of it every instant. So at the point we're finished talking about this, we're going to talk about something else. I don't really care what else, but something else. So I'm not going to beat this to death. So at the point we've gone as far as we're going to do, then, we'll talk about whatever else is on people's minds, whatever issue you might be interested in, some other experience people want to share. Liz!
Sorry, I had a question from earlier in the day.
No, we'll talk about questions earlier in the day.
But it wasn't really time to talk about today.
We got time.
I guess it wasn't for practical thing about John earlier. He was talking about something, and I think he probably answered it, but I want to explore it a little. He was talking about the fact that you ask people what their issues are and listen to them. And I guess I was wondering how ACORN responds when that issue is something that you don't want to hear. For example, if somebody, and I'm not saying this in any way sort of demonize low middle income people, because obviously, the media does that a lot and it's really bad. But say, somebody's like, the problem is immigrants, or the problem is, this, or something that obviously you're not going to fight on. I was just wondering sort of how you deal with the
Well, it's very common.
and whether, you kind of, like you said about the apathetic people, whether it's just a case of, okay, see you later, or sort of what approach.
Even more common than issues with immigrants are issues about complaints about neighbors. If you're talking about community organization and issues in the community, you're going to hear a lot about, the woman who lives 2 floors up, or the woman, the guy who drinks across the street, or these, wild-ass teenagers that are, raging through the blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're trying to, you're here for the greater social change, all of a sudden you're doing, domestic abuse cases. So, yeah, you're going to get a lot of that, and I think you have to steer the conversation back to what's constructive. There's really no way to go down that path. But I also think that, remember, you're not going to organize 100 people out of 100. You have to move your percentage that's willing to act. So in some of those cases, you can only argue as a community organization gets stronger and the neighborhood gets better, some of those problems are going to solve, but it's not your scope. There are other places you can go, right? You can carry a list of places to refer important too. If they want social work, send them to a social agency. That's not the community organization. Our job is not to police neighbors. Our job is not to turn in evidence to the state. That's just not what we do. And you need to be clear about that.
Yeah, response we had like the more issues, just because people of all walks of life are racist and police are oppressed about media. But we were like, if you've got like a diversity of people, if you start saying, but there's immigrants involved fighting your corner as well, we need to stick together and respond as a community. Like we had, it was quite funny one meeting, because, well, it wasn't funny, but like basically there's like different segments within the community. There's like asylum seekers, there's renters who are private, paying rent, there's like people who are on benefits, and there's owner occupiers, and we have like all of them involved. So when like people kind of coming out like the owner occupiers were saying like blah blah blah, they would first say you're not going to get anything, you're just not going to get all rents or benefits, and then two of the people were like I'm here like fighting, working alongside you, and then like it was the same thing kind of like around zones and stuff. So it was like really positive once you actually get to that point, you can go straight back with like, well there's like a kind of, you can actually show the diversity within the campaign, and it just immediately kind of like flows the thing. Once people kind of get to know people as well, it like really be so constructive in like dealing with those kind of divisions.
Yeah, you don't have to be the arbitrator. I think people, no matter what they say about other people, when they're actually dealing with other people, they can't express that. I mean, they actually tend to go towards the best of their character, not the worst. But that doesn't mean they won't talk to you about it on doors. If you can't move people to a constructive direction, you need to leave them alone. But if you can, good luck. Other things people have in mind, yeah?
I've got a problem with like how far to push people to take responsibility. Like people are quite happy though, like I'm clearly an activist, like I've been involved in doing activism for years and have meetings to get leaflets and have some like printer or something for free. And all these things obviously I'm quite, but then I end up really burnt out. And it also pisses me off. It's like everyone's just taking me for granted and just being like, oh, and just bitching about like, oh, it's nothing, but it's really disappointing turnout. It's like I'm like really pleased with the turnout, and I'm like, oh, but like there's many people, and you're just like, right, well, this was basically built by like three of us, for example, or like we had more people during the Rent campaign, which was still only like a dozen of us, like covering like a massive area, and like trying to kind of like get people to actually like work themselves. Like I had like there's this one guy, for example, who is emailing a lot with like information and things. He's like very good at like looking things when he actually. Anyway, it's just how to push people and how to like get people to like actually step up to like being organizers rather than just waiting for you to kind of like do all the work and then just kind of meetings and complain.
Suggestions?
Cut the work into smaller chunks for everybody and give very clear tasks that actually, like a flip chart for example, have somebody to take a minute and really stick with your minutes, but keep your minutes very, very clear. It's a question of working between a minute taker and a chair. So the minute taker at all times should be engaging with the chair, saying, would you like me to minute this item which is pop up, for example, racism? How would you like me to minute that, chair? And if it doesn't need to go in a minute, the chair say no, or you raise the rule, doesn't need to go in a minute, that's it. Keep your minutes very clear and concise, straight to the point. It's like a bullet point almost. And then at the end of it, you should have a summary of things. This is what was decided. This is what we're going to do. So and so going to do this in say in a week's time. Report in a week's time to the next meeting, and so on and so on.
But then they don't do it. They agree to do things at a meeting and then they don't do it.
Well, I mean, what I argued this morning was that you have to be very clear about, from the very beginning, about how little you're willing and able to do. Your job has to be clearly defined. My job is organizing a maximum number of people. It's not going to be passing out your flyers, I think you have to be transparent, and people have to either step up to those things or they don't happen. And to the degree the default is always that you'll do it, then the message you act on has to be consistent with the message you talk on. And if it's not, people will take advantage of whichever is the way that benefits them the most. And I just think you just have to be very clear and very rigid about how you operate, hand in the table.
Yeah, just on that point. Yeah, I think because of the level, if you're working in the community you live in, I think that's not necessarily appropriate because you're part of that community, so the work that needs to be done is what you want to do. So in order to get people empowered enough to start doing things, it is a fucking difficult one, but I think that maybe like things like buddying systems where you're doing the job with someone else until they feel comfortable to do the job on their own. It's like it almost doubles the level of work you have to do, but in the long term it makes it like a little bit more palatable and you don't end up doing it all. I don't know how successful that is always, but sometimes it is.
Sure, there are a lot of experiences people have to share. Other questions? Other problems people are trying to work out?
I'd like to share a problem, but I hope you've got some 3 minutes to
Oh, I don't have the, no, I don't think I can live through this
I
one.
found myself into a very strange situation before last month. I started a group to deal with a bit of tax, and I called it the Edinburgh Coalition Community. And with the first meeting that I organised was at my workplace, and I have this, what I thought was a very enthusiastic man. I thought to myself he was a little bit too hyper in the meeting, but left it at the bit was just
Excited.
You know, that was fun. And I cut my female intuition aside, even listened to that inner little voices, left it. And as the time progressed, it appears to me one afternoon when I was doing some research and getting up to reflect for the gap to print, that the gentleman was behind my back, getting the group against me, and was taking the group away from me, basically. And I confronted him within the library about it, and he denied it. So obviously, blah, 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 I would say. Time passed, and it suddenly appeared to me indeed at a meeting with the end customer that he did what exactly he did. He nicked the group. And I don't know if I reacted very well. I was shocked. I never heard of things like this happening. He has promised a lot to the community, the things he's going to do. It's wonderful. He can go through. It's going to be absolutely superb. I hope that he doesn't break anybody's heart, because criminal is proud enough. They've gone through hell for many, many years. And they're very proud. They're also very sensitive. And I wonder what they will do to him if they realize, it was just a lot of hot hair. I don't know if I did the right thing to let the group go and taken away like this. It's not democratic. I mean, he claims that he wants to do the best democratic because in fact I was bossy, I was delegating. To me, it was delegating. I wasn't telling people, you do this, you do that. I saw people who had talent. We had a man, for example, who specializes in directing plays, and he's used to dealing with the media, dealing with making films, short films, dealing with music. And I said to him, well, listen, I think you're the perfect guy for dealing with the PR aspect of things, and that should be your niche. We have also people who are very talented at making banners and placards and singing. I said, well, for example, when we face out the belly for elections, I'd like you to organize a protesting harmony group like Peace and Justice Center in St. John Church God. We will get
Protesting Harmony Group.
That's it.
Not many of those in the U.S.
So talented in music and singing, and you've got this ability, really soul, warm, and chivalrous. I think you're the perfect guy for that. And he thought because I was pulling the ball like that, I was bossing around, but to me that was more like, my God, these guys are talented. And yes, some people are not for the religious and literacy, but they can still do things for the community themselves. So that was my idea.
So what is the question you'd like us to address, Christine?
So, have I done the right thing? Should I be more violent and aggressive to keep the hang on to that group?
You're going to look around this group and think that somebody's going to say, yes, you should have been violent?
Well, I mean, what?
Leadership struggles are always difficult, and obviously you made a decision this time to step down while someone else stepped forward. And clearly if the...
I was kind of more like, just
terms of an ability to communicate with the rest of the membership. So if in fact there is a crisis in the new leadership, you're ready to be called back potentially. I think it's very difficult in a situation like you described for us to have a very good opinion on whether or not there would have been a better course. I think you probably handled it very gracefully. And remember, this is not life or death. This is a community group trying to make change. People have different views.
It's a matter of life and death because of how disabled people is, people who are affected by medical tax and whatever from locality. So it's not, so to me it is definitely a matter of life and death.
But you're still involved in the organization.
I am not involved in more in the organization than the social or in myself or by myself. And I realized today that fact, for some reason put me here is that I'm supposed to get back into the fray somehow. I don't know what you guys would have done in your shoes if you have the goal of the group or you have hope in adversity.
There are a lot of people that have that experience. There's no perfect answer.
So,
comment?
If you're happy to discuss this, like, it's I don't know, is it, so this person who came and took over, was it for like political gain or was it just?
I have no idea. I mean, everybody that I've spoken to who have a lot of experience as campaigners said to me that they are under the impression that this individual has an action of some sort that is not yet not clear to anyone.
So it's not clear to them now, right? Because that's something that would actually, I guess in the group in general, I guess obviously this community campaigns are aims are, I hope anyway, are a bit more true to the community that we wish to get represented and stuff like that, with the issues that we want to organise, that communities want to organise around, obviously. And it is really as far from like, you know, the Labour Party to certain elements of the far left, you know, obviously the Scottish National Party as well, they're involved in it and they're sort of, you know, oh, we could do some more about this, but we're going to do it with independence from you. And I feel that's kind of the way they respond to like the mainstream. So from the mainstream parties to, you know, elements of the far left, you know, people are there for things that more than just, you know, organising communities and getting good community fight back. And like when you face that as a community campaigner and as someone trying to organise stuff, what are the effective challenges of that? How do you keep enthusiastic about what you're on about and what other people are about?
I think you're talking about soldiering on. Just keep soldiering on. It'll all work out. That'd be my comment. Yo, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like we're kind of talking a little bit about kind of egomaniacs, which you get in everywhere, you know, every walk of life and anything, any involvement is always like dickheads and egomaniacs, like, you know, of one sort or another. And it just seems to me like the thing about like, a lot of that is so much of it is just like hot air and puff and, you know, like I think the key thing to do is, like you said, just keep soldiering on, just keep knocking on the doors, keep talking to people and just keep going because ultimately that will pay out in the end because, like, you know, the people have those kind of big egos a lot of the time. Not always, sometimes they do the door knocking and all that kind of stuff as well, but they're not necessarily doing the ground engagement and the, you know, keeping talking to more people and building is actually the answer rather than engaging in this kind of.
I mean, certainly, as I argued earlier, ideally you want a leadership structure to be based on sweat equity, not, you know, somebody's perception of what charisma equals or what a leadership type is, because that's a dangerous thing in terms of building real, sustainable.
Yeah, I see a form of danger in that for the people who are trying to enlist, because a lot of them are vulnerable. But I see a danger for himself as well, that this guy who gets it all wrong is going to really, really get hurt.
Well, I think conflict is very important in building an organization. How you deal with it is very important, but there are times when it's worth having a fight about something, and there are times when you have to make a tactical judgment that that's not the time to have that fight. And
You sent me a very strange email, and when I look at the email,
I really don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm going to be clear with you. So you've gotten the most advice any of us can give. People have been very supportive, and without being there and knowing about it, I just don't want to, I can't help you anymore about this. We can talk about it after it's over.
Well, like you said earlier, each group has to have its own dynamic. I think, you know, the local specificities.
Right.
But I mean, these problems do come up, like
Sure.
guys who, especially maybe fancy themselves as the leadership type, you know, ego problems and things like that. So, do you have any general methods that, or principles that apply in terms of making sure everyone in the room is able to?
Democracy is my core principle. Yeah. Members voted for the leadership, you learn to live with that leadership. I can't tell if there was a vote about this leadership transition or if there was a vote of any kind choosing leadership. So I really don't want to get involved in this. I mean, I don't want to have people walk out of this room and say, you know what? I was talking to this guy, built this big organization, works around the world, works in the U.S., and he says you suck. You know, I don't know how stupid I look, but I'm not as stupid as you might think. So maybe born at night, but not last night. I'm not going to touch this issue any longer. So you can talk about, whoever, you can get a caucus together, and y'all can decide whether or not the right decision or wrong decision is made, but I just don't think this is where I'm going to be involved. Please, Lord, new issue?
Possibly. I was trying
Okay, let's go with that. I'll go with the marginal chance.
Okay, it's just that I was wondering if, because obviously ACORN, you were saying has political representatives, or people who run for offices and certain whatever. And is there a way of, or any sort of techniques that you have to because I've done lots of stuff with non-hierarchical groups and more of that kind of area of things, and this is all quite new to me. How do you sort of keep a rein on that as an organisation? Is there how do you keep it democratic?
In terms of members running for political office, we quickly learned in the hardest possible ways that we needed multiple members to run. If we were having to support one member running for an office, it was very difficult to hold that member accountable once they were elected. No matter what the principles, the training, commitment, signed paperwork, agreement to meet with the board every 3 months, whatever it was. So we deliberately looked for situations where our members were running or interested in running, where there were multiple seats so that 2 or 3 of them might be elected at the same time so that they would be able to reinforce their accountability. It is, the culture of politics is so narcissistic that it's very difficult, even in the strongest organization with the most rigid accountability mechanisms, to hold people to a popular and democratic vision. There's so many transactional temptations. So we really put most of our energy in terms of our own members running for office in multiple situations where they could take control of the school board, take control of the city council. So although we elected individual legislators and people like that, our record was mixed. It was luck of the draw. Just nobody was very happy about that. That's a very good question. We looked for a lot of nonpartisan races, where you could have take over a community development council, which should be more representative of the constituency and have some money to spend to determine development. Something that was more in a common interest there in that area. But it's a difficult proposition. At the same time, you don't want to believe that only rich people and business people and lawyers can be elected. So the principle within our organization was the people shall rule, which is how do you not have people run? We want people to run. It's just the accountability thing is very difficult until you have a lot of people in office.
Can I just quickly follow up with that? How do you feel about your endorsement of Rathke?
I feel that he was the absolute best candidate. At this point he ran, and we voted to be part of history. So we voted for a chance that his election was transformational. It turned out he's been a transactional president, not a transformative president. But in terms of how we felt about it, we signed up for transformative. In the United States, with our history of slavery and the repression of whole peoples, to have the first African American elected as president was a transformative potential experience. We would not have wanted to be on the wrong side of history there. We had endorsed Jesse Jackson, who ran some years before that, civil rights leader in the United States. And it was a quixotic candidate with no real chance, but we really, because of the nature of our membership, we're not a public interest organization, we're a membership organization, and we want to support that membership. And the membership in its vote was very strong in Obama. And, on the second term, they voted, in many of the cities where we had membership, the majority for Obama was 85% in a place like New Orleans where I live, or in many large urban areas of the country. I was talking to a guy last night about Oakland. He was pointing out he was there for the election, 84%. Mixed, Latino, African American, white community, 500,000. So that was, the cities went through a bump. The countryside, not necessarily, but that's where our people live, is low moderate income people in the city. So they judge the first term as we still want the guy. That's what we're running. Here, from the back.
I was wondering if you could maybe just recap quickly on some of the stuff we talked about just before lunch in terms of like doing an organising drive from the sort of initial research to the public meeting phase of it. Because I feel that was a while ago and sort of forgotten about it.
Gotcha. So it's difficult to recap from where we got to in the afternoon to where we started in the morning. In the morning we largely talked about organizing principles, how you build a mass organization that would be involved in a large constituency, direct action, multi-issue, multi-tactic formation that was built for long-term sustainability because it had membership in other sources. For example, ACORN International is partially funded by a coffee house, a fair trade coffee house that's very popular in New Orleans. 5% of the gross proceeds of this particular coffee house provides subsidy support for every one of the ACORN International offices in Latin America. I count as a good year, a year going by where I don't have to write a single proposal to any funder. Partially that's because the experience of ACORN after it was attacked in the post-Obama election was to try to take away most of its resources. And even though a lot of its resources came from dues and other sources, it wasn't able to survive in that way. So that was, this whole question of resources and your ability to sustain them over long term, I think is very important. How you think through that. Dues is a good start. Dues isn't everything. If you organize a lower income constituency, you're still going to have more money. And so you need other kinds of plans, other kinds of allies, common support. That's where we're involved in so many. In the U.S., building ACORN, we ran organizing drives. You may or may not know. Walmart campaign for years. We organized home health care workers, hundreds of thousands, home daycare workers, won an election for 40,000 of them in New York City. It was big time organizing. We did $4.5 to $5 million of organizing a year for SEIU alone when I was there. So these are big numbers. And I said it was a big organization. We had a big staff. This is something we knew how to do, was organize. ACORN International obviously is like started ACORN back in the beginning. It's the same kind of conversation you're having. There's the one I have in community after community. As much problems we may have in English, at least it's a joy to be here where we both speak some form of English. I mean, having a conversation to a translator in Hindi or in Spanish or in Czech, you never quite know how close you got in terms of real understanding of some of what we're doing. So those principles are obviously key. Building democratic organizations is key. Having an organizing model that builds you a base. Everything that you put into change is based on whether or not you have a base behind you. And that base is more important than your education, more important than how much you know about the issue. Either have people or you don't have people. And in making change, that's the commodity of exchange. People can think I'm the worst prick in the world, but if I've got 1,000 people that I can turn out, somehow I'm in that conversation. People can think I'm the best guy in the world, and I've got, 3 people and a dog, and pretty much I can hope for a Christmas card, maybe, but I'm not going to be in that conversation. Now, this doesn't necessarily help you with anybody but your friends and family. But your job is building an organization, and building an organization means it's an ongoing dialogue with very difficult results because you're trying to build something very different. Certainly, what I built in the U.S. was different. What I'm building in these countries, what you would be building in Edinburgh or Glasgow, is different than what people are used to seeing. So you're not going to necessarily have a parade in your honor from the first time you debut these kinds of efforts. Door knocking, I really believe in these conversations. It gives you an opportunity to listen. That gives you an understanding of what the issues are. It also allows you to offset potential conflict. There have been a lot of examples. issues that are raised to test you, why you need to do, whether or not there's an issue that involves them. If you've had that conversation, people first respect the fact that you had the conversation, and you dealt with them in a direct and transparent way, that you looked them in the eye, that you didn't, swallow the ass, that you're, trying to do something. So all those things get you part of that community, whether or not anything else happens. Just putting out the best leaflet, the best, website, the best tweet on a Twitter, in a Twitterverse or whatever, can't really organize people. Those are very valuable communication tools. But actually organizing people is getting them to deeply engage in a conversation that allows them to move from what they think to whether they act. Whether or not you can tap into that level of anger, that level of intensity that gets people to step into the organization with the passion that you bring to it is important. And you have to be able to communicate the passion you have for why this is important. You can't need to, you're not sitting in the back of the room because you have no thoughts. You're sitting in the back of the room because you're allowing democracy to take action. But you're also communicating constantly with leadership and membership why it is, as you argue, Christine, personal life and death of this work. When you first start an organization, I know this has always been true for me, you walk around with something in the pit of your stomach the size of a grapefruit that is just pure 100% fear of failure. Because the one thing that you can't do if you carry the responsibility of an organization is have the organization not succeed, because it represents so much of the aspiration, hope, and dreams of people for change. And that's what, for those of you who ever decide to really organize seriously, that's what we're the handmaiden of, is dreams and the possibility that people really exercising power in an unjust society where that doesn't happen. Who knows what else Keir might have wanted me to summarize, but I will say this. If you want to know more about campaigns, there are some things. This video across the way here that has such a beautiful view of them in the back of your heads. Within a week or so, it'll be on YouTube. John, Keir, others will let you know when it is. Something that goes this long will be in various parts. You all know how YouTube works, right? So you can, deal with it in whatever way you want, but that'll be a good refresher for the kinds of conversations you're having, what notes you didn't take. There are two books up here that go into, one is about international organizing, global grassroots, that has stories and analysis of a number of campaigns in 30, 40 countries around the world that people are involved in. Now, it's 10 quid or something like that. What was it?
All right, tenor.
A tenor. Whatever a tenor is. A tenor, brothers and sisters. This, on the other hand, is a 20er. What do you call this?
20 quid.
20 quid! 20 quid. Huh? A squad? I'm not going to go. Score.
Like football.
A score?
Yeah.
Cool, okay. Citizen Wealth, winning a campaign to save working families. So when I first left ACORN, this is what I wrote about a number of campaigns that we won, about living wages, about labor organizing, about organizing Walmart around the world, about community reinvestment, how we moved some 7 million people into owning homes for the first time in the U.S. I could have bored you by spending hours on all those campaigns. Luckily, we'll thank me for that. Instead, it's a score. If anybody wants one, you've either got a tenor or a score, and you can get a book back there with a good-looking gentleman in the back. When I was first starting as an organizer in Boston with welfare rights, I was actually started in Springfield. Got out of hand and whatever, so I ended up having to go over and take a little staff in Massachusetts. And one group that we had in Roxbury, which is a largely African-American area in Boston, was the Parents for Justice. And it was a small group. They've been on welfare for a long time. They had a rule that I always, paid attention to. They were very disciplined about when they started and when they ended the meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, they asked all the ladies to come put their piece on the table at the front. Well, 21 years old, 20 years old, that's very impressive. I was the only one not armed in the meeting. A piece in the US is a gun, right? A sandwich. Yeah, I'll take that one. So they put their sandwiches right on the front table. I felt it must have been a potluck. But instead they put their piece or sandwich on the front table, and I say, okay, I've got some respect for these guys. The one thing I learned at that meeting and many others is that when you say the meeting is going to run from X time to Y time, if you don't end the meeting on time, you don't know when somebody's going to go pick up their sandwich. So as an organizer, luckily for me, and luckily for a lot of members and leaders that I've worked with, and we all, having learned that at 20 years old, I never forgot it over all these many decades, so that if the meeting's supposed to end at 5, I really believe, hey, we'll talk to everybody as long as you want after the meeting's over, but rather than look at people's, asses as they run out and sneak out instead of looking at your face, 5 o'clock was when the meeting was supposed to end. We should end the meeting at 5, and those of us who want to caucus and visit more will stay as long as there's interest. But I know I've enjoyed being with you all. It's been fascinating for me to learn more about Scotland. If you do decide to build ACORN Scotland, I'll certainly, look forward to being back. And
The weather, that'll be the thing you're looking for.
Kira told me the weather here is perfect.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So far, Kira, when he's finished building ACORN Scotland, is going to join the Scotland Tourist Bureau. Clear about that. He has a future, this guy. Food is great. The weather is perfect. Public transportation, why would you ever have a car when you can keep giving them a pound of something every time you step on it? It's just one thing after another that's great about it. So good luck in what you're doing. I really hope